Hello again, and welcome to this week's recording of Relentless Podcast. I am very excited to be joined by an old friend, a very good man that I have a fantastic relationship with for a very long time. Mr. Bob Bishop is joining me from South Carolina, and I have known him for a long time from my old golf club, New Haven Country Club. And we're going to get to hear his story and talk to him. Mr. Bishop, I want to welcome you here. How are you?
Well, thanks for the welcome and doing well. It's great to see you.
Very, very good. How have you been?
Things have been well. It's been all of North America has been a little chilly lately, but we seem to be coming out of that, so that seems to re-energize people.
Very good. Very good. And it's been a long time. I want to say almost 10 years ago. No, about 11 years ago, I met you at New Haven Country Club and came down and, visited me in New Jersey at Laurel Creek Country Club, Christine, your wife. So I really appreciate you joining me today. So just to get going, I want you to tell me a little bit about yourself.
Sure. I'm a business growth coach. I started out on my own, leaving the corporate world in 2008. And I did a lot of consulting for a number of years. And then now 8 years ago, February, I met some folks that were related with the scaling up coaching methodology. And I switched over from consulting to coaching, where I'm not necessarily on the field with the folks that are playing the game and working on things business-wise, but I am helping them along, maybe asking some questions rather than giving answers. So it's fun.
Very good. Tell me about before you got into coaching, because it sounds like we're going to have a lot of discussions on that. But I want to know about your previous life in the corporate world. What did you do and finally before you started your own business?
So I guess I'm old enough. We can go back now. So I'm an engineer, ceramic engineer, materials science to start with. So I did a little bit of that early on, but advanced through a couple manufacturing companies and ended up running a couple of them for a period of time. So I had the experience of trying to accelerate a company, trying to get things moving really fast, and learning having some successes with it, but also learning that it's a really heavy lift sometimes.
Yes. And so now you finally now get into running your own business. Tell me about that. What kind of coaching is this now, and how does it relate to today's industry?
Sure. So I work with companies that are just post startup. So someone who is beyond the startup phase, their idea now has some traction in the marketplace, their product or their service is starting to move, starting to sell, and suddenly the company's growing. Suddenly they need to add some people. They need to add some structure to the organization. They need to be strategic. They need to figure out who they're going to say yes to and who they're going to say no to. And they need to manage their cash very carefully, because when things start moving fast, good or bad, sometimes cash goes faster than the business goes. So those are the things that we spend time working on with companies. And I really enjoy it because I want to help people find a smoother, easier path than the number of hours I had to put in 20 years ago.
Yes. Oh, that's very interesting. So basically, like, if I have a company and there's great potential for growth, who finds who? Do the companies come to you, or do you look out for the companies and then kind of give them a template of what the company could be? Maybe, for instance, like with this is how we can help you go from A to B and B to Z.
Yeah, it's kind of old-fashioned marketing. I spent a number of years working on some of the digital ideas of just casting a really wide net and trying to filter through that. The challenge is that when I'm doing this with a business, when I'm working with the business leaders, we're talking about sensitive things, we're talking about financial things, we're talking about their strategy, their people. They're not really going to open up to someone who sends them an email, right?
Yes.
I need to be introduced. I need to have known them. I need to have had some relationship where they're comfortable with that. Part of my challenge with the business is I've just got to be out there talking to people, meeting folks, and having those conversations. And when they're ready, usually I'm talking to them a little early, but yes. I try to build that relationship so that when they're ready, we can get to work.
That's very good. That's very good. So does Apex mean anything, or how did Apex come about? Tell me about the name Apex.
Yeah, so Apex came from the consulting business that I started in 2008. So I've really just changed it. I title it now Apex Growth Coaching. It was Apex Consulting. I like the idea of the mountain climbing sort of concept with it. So it's worked well. I've been able to sort of leverage that a little bit, but that's the name, and that's really something that worked both in the consulting format and in the coaching format.
Oh, that's very good. Very good. So I'm assuming golf is a big thing for you, because I'd imagine you're meeting a lot of your clients on the golf course and things like that. How's your golf game?
Uh, How's the golf game? Golf game, it's always a work in progress. It is a great place to meet people. It is a great place to see how people handle challenges, disappointments, structure themselves. But I think it's also, you mentioned New Haven Country Club. I had the opportunity a couple of years after you moved. I don't know if you moved directly to New Jersey or somewhere
Yes,
else.
New Jersey.
Yeah.
Yes.
So I had a few years on their board of governors and had the opportunity to help turn that from an organization that was really focused on the short term and trying to get through things to really thinking long term, which is great once you get the momentum going. And it is, as you know, it's a club with a history that's over 125 years now. So
Yes.
there's certainly been a lot of people in its history that have thought long term in order to build it so that it lasts long. I think that there is some analogies between that and
Yes.
business and organizations, right? Is we want to think beyond numbers for this month or this quarter and think about making something that's really sustainable.
Yeah. So does this involve then, back to kind of like your work, does this involve maybe redefining the mission statement of the business and kind of realigning that to future goals? I'm curious to find out about this process, because I think that sometimes when you're a founder of a business, your primary focus is on, you have this great product, but sometimes it doesn't necessarily mean you understand how to move it from A to B. So you come into a company that's, for instance, thriving, and in today's world of AI, which is, I want to ask you about that after this, it is, you have to, there's so many dimensions. You have to think about the technology, the marketing, all
Right.
of these things. So how do you narrow it down? Does this involve, like, for instance, like, coming down with like a mission statement, let's streamline this and let's set some, strategic goals for the next 5, 10, 15 years? I'm curious how you walk into a company and how are you able to kind of sort of set goals, for instance, for business.
Yeah, well, there's a framework that I use, scaling up framework. There's an author, Vern Harnish, who wrote a book called Mastering the Rockefeller Habits in 2001, I believe. And the scaling up book now is 9 or 10 years old, but it's very much a framework that does exactly what you said. It sets up some long-term structure. We want to think about where we use the term BHAG from Jim Collins, and what do we want this company, this organization to be in 10 or 15 years? What do we foresee? Hopefully, a lot of people will think about that financially, but there are sort of emotional things too. If we think about a company like Nike back in the day, right? Their BHAG statement was "Crush Adidas," right? And that's something that a company like that can really get behind, because it's going to mean something to everyone from the CEO down to the frontline people. So we do work on those type of things, and then we do build structure where we think about the company and where it needs to be in 3 years. And if that's true, then what are the things we need to do over the next 12 months? And my cycle that I meet with people is also focused on setting 90-day goals and executing them. As far as departmental things, as far as a specific rolling out a specific technology or product or something, doing something financially or bringing something on, those would be some of those 90-day rocks. And they may fall to a responsibility of a certain department or a certain department head. So that's really what comes out of these sessions, is we build those structures. But again, the magic of it is that I have this framework and I'll bring people through it, but I don't know, if it's your business, I don't know your business. I don't know your people. I don't know your market that well, especially early on. You and your people know that. So I'm really guiding you through a framework, helping probe a little bit, helping ask some questions. And that's the fun part, because the people know it. It's just a matter of having a structure where you help to bring it out of them.
That's very good. That's interesting. I think especially like, I have a little experience kind of trying to start a small business, and we've seen some success, but it's something you don't really understand the exact scope until you're really in the game. Because from a founder's perspective, you just get excited about the idea, but often you don't really understand the nuances that constitute bringing that into full fruition. Do you have any success stories of companies that you looked at and you saw there was great potential and they haven't even tapped half of it?
Well, I would say that in most companies that's there across the board. And
Mhm.
again, I have the good fortune of I come from a manufacturing background. I have clients that are there, but I've worked with companies that are in construction management, in real estate development, digital marketing companies. So there's all across the board, and there are a lot of differences, but there are a lot of similarities. Like you said, there's always people that maybe we haven't tapped well enough. We haven't given them the channel in which to operate. There may be some systems or some product or something that hasn't been working. So that's really, part of my job is to ask those questions and get people talking about that, getting them to think about it, getting them to argue about it as a leadership team, and
Yeah.
argue constructively. Right? It's a challenge, but it's a lot of fun, and so bringing people in. You mentioned some of those vision type statements things. Right? That's a vision statement doesn't tend to be something that you can manufacture, right? It really, any company, once it's existed for, I think, a few months, already has those core things in it. You just got to discover it and get it on paper and tell people what it is. You can't create what the vision that you wish it was, the
Right.
core values that you wish were there. They're already in your organization. They just need to be discovered and highlighted.
Yes, yes. I recently saw a very interesting interview, and I think it was a gentleman that had given a speech at, I want to say Google or Microsoft, and they had an iPad back in, like, their version of an iPad, which was far much better than the actual iPad. And he said that he was in a taxi riding with an executive from Apple, and Apple were very excited about a new phone they were releasing. And he said that, by the way, just for disclosure, I want to tell you that Microsoft gave me this iPad, and I think it's game changer. It's phenomenal. And he said when he was telling this to the Apple executive, and the Apple guy said, "Yeah, we know." But in short, what he was trying to say is that Apple were so focused on becoming a better version of their last product that they didn't care so much about their competition. And true to that statement, that in a few years' time now, Apple came out with the iPhone, which basically took out the iPad and the whatever the other product was. And I say that because in today's world of technology, where do you see companies going? What do you think AI, especially, what do you think its impact is going to be on today's companies, and especially as far as transformation and
Yeah.
efficiency?
I think it's something like AI is everywhere. I don't think we've realized what the implications might be. A lot of people are looking at little bits and pieces of it, but it allows for things to move so much faster, right? And allows for things that were a little bit clunkier to just accelerate, right? And I think of just the simple things we were just talking about, right? Mission statement or core values within a company, right? So I spend time with companies, and we talk about what elements are there, what they see from the key people, and what their customers or what the market really appreciates. And so we could capture all that and feed it into, pick your favorite AI software and get a whole bunch of sample statements out for the leaders to look at and decide. And probably, we might get eight sample statements, and none of them are exactly right, but it allows us to move so much faster towards the end, right? Hearing things that are, okay, well, these three aren't any good at all. These five are part good and part not, whatever. Let's take pieces and put something together. And just the time that it takes for us to do that simple task is compressed significantly.
Yes.
Right. If you can apply that across a number of other elements of businesses, there's so much opportunity to move faster, free up resources, and bring really good things to a lot of markets and a lot of people.
What do you think it's going to look like now? Because I think that even as, AI has been around for a couple of years now, still just getting rolled out into a lot of mainstream companies and things like that. What's your projection for like the next 5 years, where AI will kind of be the norm across the board? How much of an impact do you think it's going to be? And do you think it's going to it poses a real threat to jobs?
So I think That's a really interesting question. I don't know exactly if people are going to see a lot of it. I mean, people, individuals, and companies are learning little pieces of it, applying different things, and so I think it will move, and it'll continue to move faster. There's certainly people that are concerned about jobs. There's a great podcast. Mark Andreessen was on someone's podcast, has been on it a couple of times in the last year, and just talking about, like, when you use a tool like this and move faster, you create more products, you create more opportunities, you sell more things, you create more jobs that people didn't even realize are there. Yes, I believe that AI will be moving quickly, and I believe that there will be some jobs that exist in January of 2025 that will not exist in January of 2028. But I believe that there will be far more net jobs because of things that are created by that. So
Wow.
the challenge for us as a society is we've got to have people ready to move into that next job. It's not like things were 60 years ago when at the age of 20, you joined 20, 23, whatever, you joined some company and you retired from that company, right? Things are moving too fast for that. And so as a society, we've got to think about what kind of skills and training will help people get ready to be able to move and adjust to that, because the job that they take when they're 23 might not exist 15 years ago, but there's going to be a lot of other opportunities if they're ready for it.
Yes, that's very interesting. It's things that like that you don't always think about. And I guess to your point, it's like the pace is just so fast that at some point it's gonna even out, right? At some point, people is gonna like look around and take a backseat and kind of see how to maximize on this. That's very interesting. I want to ask a little more about you personally. That sounds like it's a very detailed, meticulous career you are in, where it's very results oriented, and it's high, not intense, but it takes a lot to really help companies maximize profits and things like that. And I have a friend in a similar field. Maybe you might need to have a conversation with. But away from that kind of work, I want to find out from you, like, what keeps you going? How do you balance your life in today's age of work-life balance? How are you balancing your life being in a field like that, where it's very, you can't make a lot of mistakes helping companies maximize profits, but then being able to get away from that. Yeah.
Right. And I think that's one of the things that I would argue that technology is probably one of the things that helps to make that a little bit easier. I might have a really busy work period, but yet I can find a way, right? I can use the technology that we're using. We can use Zoom or something to still meet someone and cover something, even when I'm somewhat vacationing or doing something that seems much more leisure based, right? I had the good fortune of being in Steamboat Springs, Colorado last week, right? And couple days of skiing and in between getting some work done. Not that many years ago, if I were to get that far away, I wasn't going to be able to help any of my clients. I can do a lot more things. I can squeeze those. I've got to manage that a little bit, but I can get those other elements in there. And then I think the other important thing that with jobs moving fast and opportunities and types of jobs moving fast is, I think it's really critical to find things that you get enjoyment naturally out of from the work part. So I really enjoy watching companies go from one level to another, and inside those companies, the people that are doing it go from one level to another. That's, those are the things that are, for me, it's really important, and it helps. Like, if I go home at the end of the day and see that kind of progress, I go home with more energy than I went in with, as opposed to some other job that didn't fit me that well.
Yes. That was gonna be my next question, is what gives the greatest joy about helping companies. I guess you just answered that. It's kind of seeing where the company was from when you started and seeing where it goes. So in the 8 years you've been running Apex, do you have any success stories of a company that perhaps went from like $100,000 company to like a multi-million-dollar company? And what sort of, reviews, like when you meet with the CEO that first of all you were pitching the idea to in the first place, and they were maybe resistant, hesitant, and you showed them what you could do, and now looking back and where they are to where they were before. I want to hear some of those stories.
Well, you're right. It's an important thing to do, and I try to actually have those conversations on an ongoing basis, because I think it's helpful for people to say, hey, we did get from a certain size, and the revenue size companies that I work with are maybe 3 to 5 million on the low end. I've got a company that's in the $100 million revenue right now. So somewhere in that range, depending on the industry and such. But some of it's fun to see. Adding 5 million, 10 million in revenue is exciting. Adding profit is certainly exciting. I enjoy working with leaders who think about they're going to share that with their key employees as well. Sometimes it's not measured in the money that I put in my pocket as the leader, but how much I'm able to share with other people or bring other people along, and suddenly have a number of people who've been able to share in the success and make their families comfortable as well. So that's a lot of fun to see that. I try to. That's one of the things as I'm sort of. People are interviewing me and I'm sort of interviewing them when we're talking about it. And I want to find someone who is really serious about growth, but they're doing it themselves. I don't need to push them to make the company great, right? They want to do that themselves. I'm just going to help organize it and steer things a little bit with them.
Yeah.
And then learners, right? I think it's really important. Early on, I'll ask people about the last couple books they've read or something, right? That's an important important filter to show that someone's moving forward.
Yes. So, okay, great question. I'm going to ask you the same question. What is the last book you read?
The last book I read was a book called X is Easier Than 2X. And I will. Well, I'm talking to you about it. I'll try to remember the author's name, but it's a real interesting idea. But his concept is, if I want to grow my company incrementally, I can do a bunch of things, and I can work a little harder and push a little harder here and there, and I can get there. But if I want to grow at a 10x level, and it may not be exactly 10 times, but way faster, I've got to really look at most of the things. He said 80% of the things you're doing right now, you have to throw away. And you're going to have to figure out what are the key 20%. Everything else gets out of the way, and I accelerate in the things that really matter.
Yes.
That's a really short synopsis, but it's really intriguing about, sometimes the big moves are easier because it forces you to think differently. If you're just growing incrementally, you can just sort of do the same things a little bit differently.
I agree. And I just want to get your comment. Do you think that the difference between the guys that are running a single digit $1 million companies to the guys that are running companies that are exponentially big and grow to global audiences, do you think the difference is in the vision of the founders? What do you think is the difference between small companies and very large companies? What makes it different? What's the it factor in those companies?
Well, small and large is just probably a level of complexity or a level of the number of dollars going through. But you started to mention the speed at which they're moving, accelerating. And I think that gets into vision, gets into understanding the market, right? Somebody like Steve Jobs, who there's plenty of positives and negatives about him, but he really understood how his end users were interacting with his product. And he was fanatical about making sure that vision that he had about, understanding that and the vision of what the product ought to be turned into the product that was being developed at his company, right? And we can talk about how he did that, and some of the things he did I don't necessarily agree with, but he made amazing things happen because he understood what his customer, how his customer really would value certain things about his product, and he made sure he was maniacal about making sure they ended up in his product.
Yes, that's very good. And I want to give me who in the modern era, who do you think, who are in your top 5 best CEOs or companies that you've drawn some inspiration from, but that have had really good leaders?
That's a good question. So I think, again, from product design point of view, I would go back and say that clearly what Steve Jobs has been able to do with Apple is very impressive. And then as I think about it, I think that the interesting thing is we would go back and people would books were written and people talked about Jack Welch at GE and all the things he did. And the reality is a lot of that crumbled when he left, and we're sort of exposed as not being quite as great. So I'm a little hesitant to put current business people on a pedestal, because when we see in the long term what really happens, it may not be that great. That being said, the other thing, I am in the midst of reading a very long biography. The same biographer who wrote the Steve Jobs biography is doing one on Elon Musk. And Elon
Okay.
Musk, again, plenty of positive things, plenty of not so positive things. But boy, that guy has vision, right? I mean, there aren't many people
Yes.
who, he created the electric car market. He's
Yes.
completely changed the space programs. He's doing some amazing things with robotics. He's doing some amazing things with his company that's creating tunnels and stuff. I mean, I don't know how he manages to do all that other than not sleeping. And
Right.
I fear for him. You talk about work-life balance, and he's 52 or 53 years old. I fear for the longevity of someone like that because he doesn't seem to be very well balanced, but he does make a lot of things happen. Also, going back to your question on books, another book that I would recommend that people that you would look at or other people, there is a Pat Lencioni.
Pat Lencioni, yeah.
Pat Lencioni's book on it's called The Working Genius. He came out with it a couple of years ago.
I've seen that.
And it gets into it's a concept where I'm sure you've seen systems, and a lot of people have seen systems of you'll measure what you do at work, what your strengths are at work, where do you, and he looks at work, and he looks at it in sort of a 6-phase from wonder and invention at the early stages all the way to tenacity to get the job done. But in a 6-stage process has a system that measures where you get energy and where you get joy. And it goes back to what we talked about, right? Is he's found that if you keep people, yourself or the people you're working with, in the areas that give you energy versus the areas that take your energy, organizations really can thrive because of that. And I think it's it's a fairly simple concept, but it's been something that I've spent some time with a few of my clients on, and it's really intriguing in the results of it.
That's interesting. That's a great conversation. And I've worked at companies and, been involved with founders that kind of don't really, maybe there's been some trouble finding that kind of position people for their success. A lot of the times in these companies, I think sometimes it's kind of like, obviously somebody gets hired for their strength, but along the process, executives like CEOs or managers are trying to kind of spread them out in the hopes of them do just as good at other things that might not necessarily be their strength. And I've seen a few situations where either people have ended up giving up, resigning, quitting jobs because they were very strong in one particular area and they were doing it so well, but the company were trying to kind of spread them out to hopefully do as good at the other areas. So I don't know if the dynamics have really been supported in companies because sometimes, say for instance, I go in with one specific strength and I do the Clifton Strength Finder and maybe I'm good around building relationships for a company. Well, very often you find somebody like that being put into like management or being put into all of these, which are great areas. And I think you need to be versatile in companies, but that does not necessarily work. So what do you think? Because say for instance, this is my strength and it's probably 40%. What do you think is a good strategy for spreading somebody like that and getting them exposed into other departments of a company, for instance? Does that make sense?
Yeah, I think, exposure completely, it's important to have exposure. It's important to see other elements. But as far as responsibility, if you're the kind of person that really likes to work in all the details and using the Pat Lencioni model, work out all the final details and get everything done, right? There's people that really like that. And there's people that want to be dreamers and that's just not their thing. And it's certainly important that people understand the other things that are going on. But if you take someone out of one side and tell them your job is going to be over here for a period of time, they're going to struggle. They're going to be unhappy. They're going to come home from work exhausted and unhappy, and it's going to have a negative impact on the rest of their life. So I don't think that is. I don't think that you want to drop someone into the responsibility level. You certainly want to have them interacting. You certainly want to have them communicating and aware of what the other folks are doing. But there are very specific things that people are good at, and there are a lot of studies that I don't have at my fingertips today, but that show that it's you get a lot more out of enhancing someone's strength than trying to reverse a weakness. You'll get a lot more return on your effort doing that.
Do you think companies, like in your experience, the ones you've worked with, have been receptive to this? Because I think for me, I have had some experience in this, and I think it goes back to like the person that's heading this project or business or company, is that sometimes they're just not receptive to it, and sometimes they might not necessarily see that, and therefore it creates friction. Have you had, is this an area that you've been able to advise companies onto?
Yeah, it can happen, and there are challenges, right? There are times, right? It might be some time, right? If I'm working for you, and the person that works in, that is that works, let's use that enablement part of the six working genius, right? The
Yes.
person in our company that was the key enabler of setting jobs up for success leaves for some reason, right?
Yes.
And maybe that's not my skill set and not my strength, and you and I know that. But you may have to come to me and say, Bob, listen, I know this isn't where you're strong, but we need you to step into this right now. It's
Yeah.
not going to be forever. We're gonna work on something that's going to change that. Over time, company needs you to do this, and we understand. We'll try to maybe make accommodations for the fact that this is going to be tough on you for a while, but we really need you to step into this right now.
Yeah.
And as long as I think I would react to that positively if we had a very upfront conversation, as opposed to just some organizational change. I get dumped into something, and then 2 days into it, I realize I hate it. Right, I'm going to be
You're right.
looking for another job. Right, so
Yes. I think what you're highlighting here is good communication. And I want to get into that a little bit. I want to get your views on that too, because I think sometimes, I think a good lead in good leadership, and in my good experience, has been that really good communication where if you have to be tapped into a different role, there's clear communication. Hey, listen, we're going to get somebody in due course, but in the meantime, we really need your help in here. Anything you need along the process, we're going to support you. This won't be permanent. And then there'll be situations where you just, get an email, hey, can you help me with this, as we figure out what's going on? And before you know it, there's 2, 3, 4, 5 emails, and you have a backlog of things that you have to do on top of your actual duties without clear communication. How important do you think communication is in such a framework?
I think any type of leadership, right, is a big element is communication. I would say probably off the top of my head, right, communication and being a person that removes barriers for your people is probably the two main things I would say are what makes for a great leader. Whether my company is 3 people or 3,000, right, is a good leader. Right, we don't need a leader who's grandstanding and doing and there's plenty of smart people around, right? But
Yes.
I want to communicate. I want everybody, right? I want the people above, below, and left and right of me to all understand what I'm doing, why I'm doing it, where we're going, and
Right.
how it fits into the big picture. And then again, leaders, especially, I think it's becoming more and more apparent, are the people who can get the things out of you've bring in a bunch of people for certain skills and they're stars at some level, but there's always things that are going to get in people's way. If you can remove those barriers and let them excel, it's going to be great for the whole organization.
Right, right. What do you think are the top 5 qualities a leader should have?
All right. Well, I'll take those two to start. So, a propensity to be a remover of barriers, and then a great communicator. Let's see. So the next three, I think you've got to have. I think you've got to have some. Back to what we were talking about a little bit. I think you've got to have some level of vision and being able to link the things the assignments that are happening today, the sweat that we're doing today, and how that's building into a long-term picture. So having that vision, and then it gets in communicating that vision, right? So I think that's an important one. I think there's got to be an innate ability to understand risk. So everything that we do, right, there's any kind of substantial decision has some level of risk, right? It might be heavy risk, it might be light risk, it might be heavy rewards, it might, whatever it is, but I've got to be able to balance that, and I've got to be able to intuitively understand that, and then move forward and take that risk. So, and there's going to be right and there's going to be wrong, but if I struggle with that process, I come across as indecisive, and that's really rough on the organization.
Right. That's a good one.
And I guess and then some level of self-confidence, because you've got to be able to take that risk, right? You've got to be able to understand that when I take that risk, we're gonna do this. We're gonna march forward based on all the information I have today. I've put this together, and here's where we're going. And If it fails, which is going to happen sometimes, that's fine. If we made the right decision based on what was there, or we made the best decision based on the information we had, great. If we didn't make a good decision, maybe we do a little bit of recon on it and try to learn so that we can make decisions, better decisions in the future.
That's very good. Those are really good ones. Okay, we're gonna start winding down here, but lastly, I want to get into, like, for me, I want to ask you a couple questions about this subject, because for me, even in my little small way, especially kind of when I think about my journey and I think about some of the things that have happened to me and kind of the things that have now taken precedence for me, it's a lot about giving back. And I think that my greatest joy comes from actually, because I've had, somebody like you and, the conversations we've had in the past, I've learned so much from people that have taken time that they normally really shouldn't even have to, but they've kind of gone out of their way to come through for me. And when I look back at my own career, I look back at those things, and that's kind of become my kind of like my mantra, is that to pass things on, any experience that I have, and to really give back to communities. Are you involved in any community activities for yourself, like volunteering or any of those things? I know you mentioned being on the boards of places like Country Club and things like that.
Yeah, I would say the one that's really fun right now here in so I'm partially based in Connecticut, but mostly based in South Carolina, Charleston, South Carolina now. And I've recently started working with an organization called the Harbor Entrepreneur Center, and it's been a really exciting place to spend some time. And they are a group that is supporters of early stage entrepreneurs, both in giving them some resources, giving them some space to work, giving them some people to have what they call collisions with, right? So other people who are thinking that way. And so it's a really neat place. And I've spent some time with them, and we're actually in the process of helping to organize some forum groups where they can learn from each other. So it's not really part of my business, but it is something that has been really, really fun to help out. And in the long run, it may even create some business opportunities. But for now, it's just really fun seeing those people and experiencing the energy that they have.
That's very good. Okay, final couple questions. What would you have told your younger self back graduating college? Because you probably, you were kind of going on your path as an engineer. And I asked this question because I think I'm finding out this myself, that patience is a really big thing, especially as young people, young innovators, young entrepreneurs. There's just that level of excitement that comes with, having an idea, being enthusiastic about ideas and, businesses, that sometimes it's very easy to lose track of the process and what it takes. And that can lead into other kinds of, panic and wrong decisions along the way. What would you have told yourself as a young person coming through, knowing what you know now?
Yeah, I think it is, right. You mentioned patience, right? It is a long game, right? And so some extra, I had the opportunity to I had a company that a few years after college put me through grad school, but I didn't see that coming. I wasn't really from a very wealthy background, so I needed to get out and start working after undergrad. But the reality is thinking in the long term, taking some of those learning opportunities, whether it is classically educational or travel and getting out and seeing the world and meeting people from different places and getting different perspectives.
Yes.
All those things might not move my career forward or put money in my pocket today, but they sort of build up what you can become in the long run. So playing that long game, I think, is really important. And then somewhat related to that is, I think, that understanding that nothing is a straight line. Thinking like an engineer, right? You think, oh, I'm going to get this job. I'm going to do this role for 2 or 3 years. I'm going to get a promotion. I'm going to do this other thing, and I'm going to, and then I, well, wait a second. I'm in this company. I don't see where that's going to go after. The reality is, so many things change, right? Companies get bought, they get sold, they fail, they have explosive growth. You get moved, your situation changes. So trying to project that far out is crazy. So again, play that long game, build those experiences, but don't expect or get stressed out when it's not a straight line. Sometimes there's sideways moves that have a lot of value too.
That's very good. Very, very good. Very good. Well, Mr. Bishop, on that note, I want to get your final comment. If you could write a book now, what would you title the book?
If I could write a book, I think I would write something. Think about the title, but I'll talk through what I think it would be. So there's too many people that write about here's what I did, or here's what I've seen, or here's my study of what's happened in this industry or this place or whatever, and kind of looking backwards. And I like history, but I think I would take all of that and write something about what I see for trends, and where I would maybe guess or roll the dice on what things might be in 5 years or 10 years or something. So to your point, with AI, with the changes in business, I think I would have something about where, the crazy things that might happen, right? Maybe moonshot is a title, right? It's got to be something. Where is this possibly going? And the reality is my projections in 10 years would probably be wrong and the book would be worthless, but I think it would be a really interesting exercise to think about and capture.
That's very good. Very good. Well, sir, I couldn't thank you enough for joining me today. Where can people find you, finally, just for any business leaders that want to connect with you?
So folks can find me both. Bring my scaling up logo here. So I'm Scaling Up Coaches. So there is a scalingeup.com, Scaling Up Coaches, and you can find my bio there. I am apex-consulting.biz. Mm-hmm. Easier to think about than to say, for email and LinkedIn, Bob Bishop. Love to have conversations like that. I find it to be a great opportunity to learn. And again, some of those conversations build into relationships that could be business, but it's not a hard sell right off. So love to have conversations early on.
Absolutely. Mr. Bishop, thank you so much for joining me. I really enjoyed this, and we're going to get connected again.
Sounds great. It was great to see you again, Vincent.
Absolutely. Thank you very much. Take care. Bye.